I think I like slapped out the rest of it. So it's like, I was so good. She just laughed. I know. That was so good.
Morning.
Good morning.
Morning, Sam.
Yeah, Sam, you're beautiful.
Okay, just let's see where we left off. Yeah. Okay, we talked about the national party, the state party, and the local party apparatus, which is when you get the local organizations, you get down to the precinct level. And if you really want to change the country, this is where you do it. Okay, this is where you organize at the local level and bring in candidates that you think can win, that think like you do, get people out registered to vote, get them out to vote. Okay, that turning them out. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about is the reasons why parties have decreased in power and influence over time. Okay, they're still important. Okay, for many of the reasons that we talked about, but they're not like they used to be. Okay, so one of the reasons is the rise of moderates, and you guys know who you are. Okay, people that don't want to identify with these two political parties. Obviously, you probably have areas that you tilt towards the Republican Party, you moderates, and areas where you tilt towards the Democratic Party. That's why you're a moderate. Okay. And then just the ugliness of party politics kind of turns people off. You know what I mean? And then you're like me, or you have people like me who get so frustrated with the party that they would align with. And you're like, well, where do I go? I got nowhere to go. You know what I mean? So that has decreased their power. Okay. And then what I talked about earlier is the process of direct primaries, where this, going back to that idea where you start with a certain number of candidates and then you whittle it down to one. At the national level, the party used to decide who the candidates were going to be. Now the voters for the Republican and Democratic parties get to choose the candidate to run for the office. Does that make sense? Okay. So like in Georgia, which they do it differently there, but we're going to be paying a lot of attention to Georgia. That election for 2 Senate seats is December 7th. Okay, so in their general election, they allowed more than one candidate. They didn't have primaries. So that's why nobody got to 50%, because they had multiple candidates running and they're all drawing from that 100%, and nobody got to 51%. Okay, so this has really reduced the party's power when they started doing the primaries and the caucuses that I talked about the other day, right? Everybody understand what I'm talking about there? Do I need to explain that again? We're okay there? Yeah, all right. All right. TV obviously is going to change things, but the internet really does, okay? This has reduced the need for parties' information as far as educating voters about candidates, about issues. The internet in most places is free. Okay, so if you support a particular candidate or party, guys, you can just retweet or share Facebook posts or subscribe and like videos on YouTube and stuff like that. And so these candidates can, produce commercials, use online advertising and so forth. Now, some of that they have to pay for. Okay. I don't know if any of you guys noticed coming up to the election, if you went to YouTube, there was like a week there where the Trump campaign had bought the banner. You know what I mean? So the first thing when you opened it up, it talked about Trump and there was an ad there. And then I think it was the week before the election, the Biden campaign did the same thing. And when I opened YouTube, I saw Joe Biden. Okay. So yeah, some of that, and that they probably spent a lot of money on that, as you can imagine. Okay. So that's a big thing. And then this has really changed things as well. And this is a single issue. And what PACs are, guys, PACs are political action committees. Okay? And this has really changed politics. Now, when we talked about factions with James Madison, okay, interest groups, parties, groups of people that join together for a common goal, okay? There was a Supreme Court case about 10 years ago called Citizens United. Now, you and I as individuals have freedom of speech, we have freedom of expression. You and I can give money to a candidate. You and I can give money to a party, okay? And so can very wealthy people like Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates. Now, back in the 90s, Bill Gates used to say he gave equally to both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, just in case the other one won. He gave money to both parties. And that way he would, he was in the pocket of both parties. You follow me? When you look at giving, there are no limits anymore, okay, to what people can give. Now, you guys are familiar with like unions, like the NEA is the National Education Association, it's the teachers union. They have millions of members around the country, okay? They give a lot of money to candidates. So do the United Auto Workers. So does the Fraternal Order of Police, okay? These are all like government unions and private sector unions. They give a lot of money to candidates, okay? And so do corporations. And that was the big change with Citizens United. Now that Supreme Court case is the boogeyman for people that think there's too much money in politics, okay? Because you saw it, okay? You had a Senate race in North Carolina where the two candidates combined spent more than $100 million, okay? I saw a post by, you guys all know, the Dallas Mavericks owner, Shark Tank guy, Mark Cuban. Mark Cuban, you don't know who Mark Cuban is? You ever watch Shark Tank? He's always the one on the left.
Yeah. He's like the only memorable one.
He's the only what?
The only memorable one.
Memorable one?
That's a fact.
I like the lady with,
Yeah, the woman. There's one woman.
I like them all.
I like Reykjavik.
She's cool too, yeah.
Is that the bald guy?
No, that's the guy on the right.
Oh, okay.
I've never seen Shark Tank, but I know who Mark
seen
Cuban. I don't know them.
The bald guy is Mr.
Mr. Wonderful.
You know what is Mr. Wonderful? If you look up Mark Cuban, you'll never know.
Yeah, so Mark Cuban made a post the other day, and he knew, after this election, this was just recently, he said that, everybody knows millions and millions of dollars are going to pour into these Georgia races, these two Senate races. It's going to get crazy. He said people should consider maybe giving to like a charity instead of these Senate races. It's $100 million, guys, in one Senate race. Okay, South Carolina was close to that. It's mind blowing. Okay, but the Supreme Court said corporations are people too. Corporations are run by individuals, staffed by individuals, and so corporations can give money as well to political campaigns, not just individuals. Okay, and this has really helped spur the amount of money coming in. Now, when we talk about interest groups, the big ones I talk about are the NRA, the National Rifle Association, right? AARP. There are hundreds of interest groups. Dairy Farmers of America, Kansas for Life. These are all interest groups, okay? And they raise money to get people elected. Yes? Okay. What political actions committee do, they generally do not represent one entity or business or corporation or union, but a group of people that are like-minded, okay? Now, my wife works over at Coke. Okay, and I'm just going to use this as an example. This is the annual report of Coke Political Action Committee, Coke PAC. Okay, now if you work for Coke, they'll send you an email and say, hey, if you want to give to the Coke PAC, we are going to support candidates that are business friendly. Okay, Koch Industries has business interests in, I wouldn't say all 50 states, but I'd say in probably 35 of the 50 states. They do Georgia paper, they do pipelines, they do petroleum products, they do fertilizer. For a while, they were even doing dog food. Okay, so they're very diverse. So my wife joined Koch Pack, and she takes a little bit out of her check each month, and it goes to fund political campaigns. Okay, I'll pass this around, and this basically shows you every person in 2010 that every candidate in 2010 that Koch Pack gave money to. Okay, most of them have an R next to their name, but there are some that have D's next to their name as well. Okay, you can look through this.
Corporations are people too, then.
Yes, D's are people too.
Corporations, I meant.
In some states, you have, they're, dominated the Democratic Party. So you want to win favor with Democrats as well. Okay. Now, Charles Koch actually gave an interview this month. Okay. He is now the sole owner of Koch Industries. His brothers passed on. And he said he felt like he made a mistake by getting involved in politics. Okay. The Koch brothers are libertarians. And for many years, they were the boogeyman on MSNBC. If you turned into MSNBC, they always loved to talk about the Koch brothers. But as libertarians, they share some values with the Democratic Party as well as the Republican Party. So anyhow, guys, these PACs raise hundreds of millions of dollars. Okay, these political action committees. And because they raise so much money, it really decreases the amount of money that the parties have to raise. Okay. Now, money doesn't win you elections necessarily. If you go back to 2016, and I talked about this before, who did the Republican Party want to be the nominee? They wanted Jeb Bush to be the nominee. He had the largest PAC of any candidate, Democrat or Republican, in 2016. Over $40 million in. Okay. That was supporting him, this PAC was. He was one of the first candidates to drop out. Okay. The voters get to choose now. So money doesn't guarantee you victory. You understand? In South Carolina, Lindsey Graham, the Republican who was the incumbent running for re-election, the polls were showing that the Democrat had a chance in South Carolina. And they poured in tens of millions of dollars, the Democrats did, to help this Democratic candidate. And he lost by 10 points. The polls were way off. Just think about how much money they just wasted on that campaign. And I think that's something that these PACs, these parties need to maybe look at and say, we're wasting money. But it's about power. It's about controlling Congress, guys. Controlling the White House. Okay? So people are passionate about it. Now, you do have some single issue PACs, political action committees. Okay? And when we do the day where we look at political advertising, I have this one here about vets against John Kerry. John Kerry ran against Bush in 2004. Okay, John Kerry was a senator from Massachusetts. Okay, he was also a Vietnam vet. Okay, he was what was called a swift boat captain in Vietnam. So basically, he was on a small boat that would patrol the rivers in Vietnam and into Cambodia. Okay. John Kerry was wounded 3 times. He got 3 Purple Hearts. If you get 3 Purple Hearts, you get to come home. Okay. Now, how do you get a Purple Heart? You guys ever see the license plate? Purple Heart has a medal with a picture of George Washington. Okay? Purple. If you get wounded in combat, you get a Purple Heart. Okay? Now, these 3 Purple Hearts that John Kerry got, none of them required, like, hospital stays. Okay? Like where he was in the hospital for months or anything like that. Okay? When he came home, John Kerry was against the war in Vietnam. He was a soldier. He spoke out about it. Okay? Now, when he was doing that, the country was deeply divided over the Vietnam War. But at the same time, he was criticizing American soldiers and their behavior in Vietnam. We had many veterans that were prisoners of war in Vietnam that were being tortured. And what the North Vietnamese wanted our POWs to do was to go on tape and admit to war crimes so that they could use that as propaganda against the United States. And so these POWs would be tortured if they would not admit to war crimes. Okay? But John Kerry came home and was saying that our soldiers were committing war crimes. So when John Kerry ran for president in 2004, there were a lot of these vets, especially these POWs, that lived for years in places like the Hanoi Hilton, which was a, they basically kept them in a small 4x4 little box and tortured them. People like John McCain, who was tortured. Okay. They put together a political action committee called Swift Boat Veterans for Truth. And they ran political advertisements attacking John Kerry. Now, when you have other vets going after this man running for president, even though, they ran a few of these ads, but by 2004, guys, you had the internet. So this was being spread through the internet as well. And it had an impact on the election. Okay, but that was just a small group, small political action committee of these veterans. Okay, so these are all reasons why the parties have decreased. And I'll show you that ad when we get to that day. Okay, and you can make up your own mind how you feel about that. All right. All right, we're going to jump down to voter qualifications here. Your homework is due tonight, correct? The 18 questions on political parties. Thanks tonight. Okay, I've got quite a few turned in already. Okay. So make sure you get your points. Okay. All right. Now, states have the right to set voter qualifications with the following exceptions. So the Constitution prevents them from putting in some things. Okay. You can't deprive the right to vote based on race, color, or past slavery. What amendment? Say 15. Okay. What about sex? What amendment? 19. Okay. Okay. So you can't deprive the right to vote based on those things. You can't have poll tax. I put it in there. 24th Amendment. You can't set a maximum voting age, which goes back to the Voting Rights Act of 1970. So you can't say, hey, once you hit 90, you're too old, can't vote anymore. Okay. Now, we did have some people over 115 vote in this election. If you hadn't heard about some of the dead people voting this year. You can't make literacy a requirement. Again, that goes back to the Voting Rights Act of 1970. Okay. However, question. We're going to get to that. Yeah. Yeah. Some people are not allowed to vote. Okay. And that could be somebody convicted felon in many states, although some states are reversing that. In Florida. Okay, in Florida, you guys know what restitution is? Well, let's say you steal from somebody, you go to jail, you do your time there, but then the court orders you pay restitution, you pay them back. So in Florida, they changed the law and said convicted felons can vote if they paid the restitution. Okay. Michael Bloomberg, who was running for president as a Democrat early on, he used to be the mayor of New York. Bloomberg News, he's like one of the wealthiest men in America. Okay. He started paying the restitution for convicted felons in Florida so they could vote this year. Okay. He spent a bunch of money doing that so they could vote. Because he thought that those people would vote for who? Him. Well, not him. This was after he dropped out for Biden. Yeah. Sure. Well, it just gives the money to the individual, they pay the restitution, then they can vote. Yeah. You've also heard about people paying bail for rioters and looters and stuff like that as well. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so most states have these requirements in place, okay? Citizenship. So this is interesting to most people. Guys, there is no constitutional requirement that you be a U.S. citizen to vote in our elections. It's not in the Constitution. Now, at this point, every state requires you to be a citizen to vote in federal elections, okay? In California, they have allowed people that are not citizens, that may even be here against the law, to vote in things like school board elections. Because if you take somebody that's undocumented immigrant and they go to our schools, then the California, they said, well, they should be able to choose who their school board is, because their kids go there. Okay, so it won't be long, guys. That California or Oregon or one of those states on the left coast says we're going to let non-citizens vote in federal elections, then you're going to have a lawsuit. Okay. And I don't know what the Supreme Court would say on that. Okay. But up to this point, citizenship is they all have it. Residence. You must live in a state for a specific length of time, usually 30 days. Okay. This again comes up with Georgia. The election was November 3rd. Okay. If you were to move to Georgia on November 4th and you were there for 30 days, and the runoff for those two Senate seats is December 7th, conceivably you could do that. Okay, now it's November 16th, so it's too late. You want to move to Georgia now so you can vote in that those Senate races. Okay. Usually it's 30 days. Why? You guys know Kansas history. Jayhawkers, border ruffians, going back to the Civil War, right? Keep people from crossing the border to vote. It's also passed because you need to know time, 30 days to know the candidates, to know the issues facing that community. Yeah. Good question. Let's say you're rich. And like my brother-in-law is rich, okay? He's got a house in Colorado, and he's got a house in Texas, okay? They spend their winters in Houston and their summers in Colorado. And so it's November, so usually they're back down in Houston, okay? You could conceivably register in both states. It is illegal to vote in both states. But you can certainly do it. New York, Florida, vote in New York in the morning, hop on a plane, fly to Florida. Now that's before we had advanced voting and mail-in voting. You could hop in your plane and do it. Okay. There's a lot of border, like Kansas City. Okay, but you got to have an address in both states. And you got to claim it as your permanent address. So when you guys go off to college, okay, so like the twins, they're down there in Florida. Okay, Florida's a swing state, right? So maybe the twins register in Florida, their dorm room as their permanent address, they can vote there. Okay? But don't vote in Kansas too. You get caught, there's pretty big fines for that. And I mean, you could actually go to jail for that. Okay. Good? Okay. So most states you must claim permanent address, out-of-state college. Some don't let you do that. Out-of-state college, most states do. Right. Yeah, and then and it's changing. This year changed a lot. Okay, so I don't know what happened, but my son Jack's, he's an hour and 45 minutes away in Chanute for college. But he drove back on Tuesday the 3rd to vote. I don't know if he could have voted in Chanute. I mean, in a normal year, you couldn't do that. You have to vote in the precinct you're in or get an absentee ballot. Okay. As we know, in some of these states, they just sent out ballots to every registered voter in the state. Okay. Now, when you move, you're supposed to change your voter registration. Like if I move from the east side to the west side, I have to renew my registration or they're going to send my information to my old address. Okay. In this country, a lot of people move. So you have ballots showing up at people's addresses that hadn't lived there in years, decades. Okay. No fraud is going to take place there. Nobody will fill that out and send it in, right? And if they're not doing signature verification, you can see where people would question the voting. Okay. Okay, minimum age set at 18. We know that amendment, 26th Amendment. Okay. Okay, registration. Now, I did hear these notes, I've had these notes for a while, that other states were doing same-day registration. I had heard that Wisconsin was doing that. So when you look at a county and you say, okay, this county has 100,000 registered voters. And then you look at the number of votes that came in for that county, and it says there were 160,000 votes cast from this county. How in the heck does that happen? Ask the people in Cleveland, Ohio, or in Philadelphia, because the number of people that voted is higher than the number of registered voters. North Dakota, you don't even have to register. You just show up and show proof of address that you live in North Dakota and you can vote. Okay. So all states you have to register, from what I understand, all the other states. And once you register, this is your permanent address until you move, die, or convicted of a felony. Okay, and convicted of a felony, they're supposed to take you off the voting roll, depending on your state. Again, laws are changing on this. Okay, why do we have this? Well, this is hopefully a defense against fraud. So you say you register to vote, you prove where you live, show ID for that. Okay, you have a signature. Okay, that if you lie, there are punishments for it. It's against the law. Okay. So this is used as a defense against fraud. Okay, now it can't be so hard to register to vote that it discourages people from doing it. And this is something we've changed over the years big time. So like when I told the story about how I went to register to vote when I turned 18, I had to go to City Hall. That was the only place to register to vote, City Hall. Now you can register online. You can register at Dillon's. You can register at the post office. You can register, I think, at Quick Trip. I don't know. It's easy. Okay, so we've really made it a lot easier to have access to registration. Registration usually ends 20 days before an election, so they have time to get you on the voter roll. Okay, so some people claim that, well, we should have same-day registration. I don't know if I agree with that, but we've made it pretty easy to do. Okay, who can't vote? Okay, most states exclude convicted felonies. Like I said, this is starting to change a little bit. Mentally ill, so like if you're in a mental institution, most states don't let you vote. If you've been dishonorably discharged from the military, most states don't let you vote. Okay. So that's that. Good. Okay. Now, non-voting. Why people vote, why people don't vote. Okay. Now, I've put up some statistics here. Okay. On average, 58% of people that are eligible to vote will vote. That was slightly higher in 2000, 2004. 2008 was a big jump. That was Obama ran, okay, first time, had a lot of new voters. And then 2012, it dropped back down. 2016, I think it was 55. Okay. I don't know what the numbers are yet this year, but it may be as high as 70. Yeah. 90% nationally?
No,
Oh, Sedgwick County, 90%. Okay, so you have the changes that made it easier, like going to Intrust Bank Arena to vote, right? And that was open like for a couple of weeks beforehand. Early vote, mail vote, and then in-person vote. Now, that seems really high, doesn't it?
Yeah, they sent out 90,000 advance ballots. So that was a big part of it.
Okay, so was that automatic? Like, you didn't have to request that? Or did you have to
No,
request?
advance ballots for the time you have to request it by a certain day.
So
And then
90,000 people requested?
requested and then
Okay.
it's valid.
Okay. That's impressive.
Yeah, it was so much that every site got a ballot in, specifically for advance ballots. It was really annoying because I had to take it to the office because I was a supervisor judge. So
Okay, so tell us about that. So, so every mail-in ballot had to go to a specific,
no.
so what were you saying?
So okay, so they had so many people want advance ballots that they put I don't know when they put them up, probably around the time of early vote centers. I think early vote centers, they all got a, like, if you go down to, they're like big metal ones.
Yeah,
On the city,
Yeah,
you go in and drop it off, and then they went and picked those up every day. And then every site on election day got this like light blue ballot bin box specifically for advance ballots.
Okay.
So it was annoying because every site gets so much stuff and I have to take more stuff to the office.
Did they do signature verification?
Yeah, they do it with the driver's license.
Right. Which is, when you do your driver's license, it's on a frickin'.
It's not perfect because humans look at it because there's a big machine to
Yeah.
help run it, but
Did-
it's called the tritech and they run the ballots through and it takes a picture of it and so then they say in this order and then the people in the office look and they verify it.
Do you know if they threw any out?
If they do, I think it goes. They don't throw them out. They like go to a provisional board,
Right.
and people look at them. But
Okay.
they're on something.
Okay. So I think with that, that's one of the complaints in Pennsylvania is that.
I don't know why you wouldn't check the signature.
Right. Well, what they were doing was, if there was a problem with the ballot, they were calling ones that voted for Biden and telling them to come correct it, but they weren't calling ones that voted for Trump. That's one of the lawsuits.
Yeah.
And so that goes to the 14th Amendment, equal protection under the law. That's what the law, and I don't know if that's going to have any traction or not, but that's one of the lawsuits. Good, thanks. All right, so, okay, so people who cannot vote, okay, who didn't vote, of the 93 million that didn't vote, 20% could not vote. Okay, I'm not going to ask you these specific numbers on the test. Okay, this is just kind of interesting to look at. Okay, so some people said, well, they were sick, physically unable, and again, this election throws a lot of this out the window. Okay, because of all the advanced ballots and all that. Okay, so sick or physically unable to vote on that day, 6%. 20% were traveling, forgot to get an absentee ballot, or didn't know they were going to be traveling on election day. Convicted of felony, mentally ill, and then Jehovah's Witness, maybe they don't vote because of their religious belief. Okay, and Jehovah's is one of those religions that they don't vote. Don't ask me why, I'm not an expert. Yes?
So that's probably includes like homeless people, right? Because they don't have any food.
It could, although they might be able to use like somebody else's address or something like that. But that's a good question. Yeah. Yeah, that is a good question. Nobody's ever asked that before. Yeah, we'll have to look that up.
I think that they have a valid driver's license. I'm not sure about mine.
Well, what if they don't have it?
Well, you don't have to have a driver's license. You have to have an ID. Yeah, yeah. Which in the state of Kansas, because we have voter ID laws to vote, you got to have an ID. If you cannot afford one, the state will pay for it. It's like $5, I think, something like that. Okay, the other people that didn't vote. Okay, so 20% couldn't vote. These are the reasons why the other 80% of the 93 million that didn't vote. Okay, they said my vote doesn't make a difference. Okay, which is silly. Okay, if you look at, have they decided who won, O'Donnell or Sarah Lopez, I think's her name? It was down to like less than 100 votes. Okay, they weren't on my ballot, but anyhow, okay. Don't think guys. There are you could look it up. The number of elections that were won by one vote. There's a bunch of them. Okay, they distrust politicians, don't we all? Right. Forgot to register. Oh, shoot. Okay. Time zone fallout. I don't know if I talked about in this class. That's a pretty good one.
No.
It's not a gun. Is that better?
No.
Georgia, Alabama. That's freaking good,
That
man.
is not good.
It looks good.
I think it was.
Yeah, it looks pretty good.
Yeah,
I
okay.
feel like that's too long.
Have I drawn this on the board for you, this class? Okay, good. All right. So, Florida. Okay, we go back to the year 2000. Okay, this is Bush versus Gore. Al Gore. Gore was the vice president for Clinton for 8 years. Bill Clinton. Okay. So he was running after Clinton. So this is 2000. All right. Bush was the governor of Texas. Bush's brother was the governor of Florida. Jeb Bush was the governor of Florida. Okay. And so, guys, on election night, this right here is the Eastern time zone, and this is the Central that we're in. We're in the Central time zone. Okay. And so the polls close here at 7 o'clock Eastern time. You got to wait an hour. Okay. These people are still voting. You know what I mean? An hour later. In the year 2000, CNN called Florida for Al Gore before the polls had closed here. Now, I used to live here. I went to high school here. I went to junior college here. Okay. This is LA. This panhandle of Florida is lower Alabama. Okay, or as we refer to it as the Redneck Riviera. Okay, so pine trees, pine trees, pine trees, pine trees, beautiful beach. Gaston, Fort Walton Beach, Pensacola, yeah, beautiful beach. Okay, it is awesome. Okay, so anyhow, I lived here, okay, and then I went to junior college here. So I told you guys a story about when I went to register to vote.
How long did you have to drive to go to college?
2 hours. Now, this right here is a river. Music fans here? Way down yonder on the Way down yonder on the Chattahoochee.
What?
You heard that? You heard that? Okay.
Yeah.
So,
That did not rhyme.
so I went to junior college at Chipola Community College, right, named after the Chipola Indians, right? And it had about 20,000 people in it. Now, when I graduated from high school when I was 17. Wasn't because I was like advanced or smart or something. My mom put me in kindergarten when I was 4. Okay, so I graduate. I turned 18 in October, so I'm already in college when I turn 18. Okay, and so I went to register to vote, City Hall in Marianna, Florida. This was 1986. Okay. When I went to register, the lady asked me, said, "Do you want to register as a Republican or a Democrat?" And I said, "Well, I think I want to register as a Republican." And she said, "Are you sure?" I was a little bit taken aback. I said, "Yeah, I think I'm sure." She goes, "I'm sorry, I don't mean to offend you. You may not have anybody to vote for if you register as a Republican, because everybody was a Democrat." In fact, my first girlfriend at Chipola Junior College, her dad was a state representative in Tallahassee, and he was a Democrat. Okay, they're still Democrats. Okay, we're friends on Facebook. Meredith. She's a lawyer. Oh, it's fine. My wife doesn't.
Are you friends with all your ex-girlfriends on Facebook?
Actually, one of my other ex-girlfriends that I dated for more than a year. I'll have to tell you that story sometime. How much time we got? I don't have time to do that, but if you remind me, I'll tell you that story about Maureen. This Meredith was junior college, Maureen was high school. Both blondes. I married a brunette for a reason. Sorry, Maureen.
What's your wife's name?
Jean. She's a Texas girl. So is Maureen. No, seriously, like Maureen, I went off to college. She was a year behind me. Okay, I went off to Chipola. We're still dating. Okay, I come home, go to this party, and I walk in. I didn't tell her. We didn't have cell phones back then. So I walk into this party, and there's Maureen sitting on my friend Mike's lap.
Oh. What'd you do?
I guess we're not dating anymore.
Was he a Democrat?
No, they're Republican. But anyhow, I'll tell the story quick. I should probably turn off the tape. Okay, so to get back at Maureen, a couple weeks later, I come back, I call Michelle. And Michelle, I know she's always liked me, you know, and so I said, "Hey, you want to hang out this weekend?" And so Michelle and I, and she doesn't get along with Maureen, we go to this party. And, you know, Michelle's like, she knows what happened with Maureen and me, and so she we go to this party, and Mike and Maureen are there, and she calls Maureen out. She said, "I can't believe you treated Charlie like that." And Maureen comes back. Next thing you know, we're taking it outside. And Norman Parker, who is, we call him Norman Bates. He's crazy. He's a football player. I mean, he's always in trouble. His father beat him. It's not his fault. I mean, yeah, it's bad. He did some time. But anyhow, Norman's like refereeing this fight. Now, guys, if you've never had 2 girls fight, I mean, I don't know. I'm sitting back going, "Oh my God, I can't believe it." And they're pulling the air. It was pretty awesome. Yeah. So Maureen and Mike got married.
Oh.
And they have 2 kids, same ages as my kids, and we're all friends.
Why did you date so many girls that have names?
I don't know. And they were all blonde. I said, and I learned my lesson. I said, I'm getting out of that. Okay. All right, that's enough.
Now we have it on video.
Yeah. I don't know if my wife even knows that story.